We now turn to one key theme, which is responsible AI, which is a transversal theme for us for this event. And also, it's my pleasure to welcome here on stage with me Karine Ysebrant. So she's an executive thought leader in AI ethics and human transformation. So we heard already about the human-centric transformation. And you have also helped to shape Belgium's first AI ethics charter for marketing people. So really interesting topic. So you're known for creativity, organizational change, and ethical governance. And let me hand over the floor to you now, Karine.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay. Hi. I'm Karine Ysebrant, and I'm very glad to be here together with you. I come from the world of business, particularly media and advertising. So totally something different than the speakers that you just had. And during 20 years, I worked taking responsibility in organizations I worked for and sitting in management teams and boards. And since a few years, I stopped that. And I redirected my career to AI ethics, and responsible AI. And now I spend my time working with leadership boards implementing responsible AI in their organization. So the focus is quite more business than what we've heard so far. So the question today, because the world evolves very fast and organizations are really under pressure. The question today is, how can we consider responsible AI within companies without slowing down the innovation, without losing time versus other competitors that do not think about responsible AI eventually. And one central question that we should keep in mind when we're thinking about that is really, where does the responsibility goes when the machines decide for us? And that's guiding the key work I'm doing. So let me bring you in management board for a few seconds. It's a virtual scene. You see we are in the boardroom and table is there. And you have all the board of directors sitting at the table. And on the table, what do you have? You have an AI project. And the CEO feels the pressure within the company and outside the company because it has to move fast. It has to deploy this system to be competitive, to save money, and so forth. But at the same time, he hears a lot about responsible AI. What is it exactly? So it will ask the board of directors, what is responsible AI? Are we going to deploy this project? Is it going to be responsible? And the thing is that in the room, you have 6 persons in the board, and they all answer a different question because they are all responsible of a small part of this responsibility within the organization. So the first one to speak will be the legal officer. And for the legal officer, it's about being compliant. If it's compliant with regulation, the project is responsible. So the person sitting in front of the legal officer is the risk officer. And for this person, the definition is really something else. So he says, no, it's not enough to be compliant. The risks have to be assessed. The risks have to be mitigated. And then we can trust the project. And the data chief officer, the engineer, the tech guy in the room says, oh, no, guys, you don't have it. System is responsible if it's robust. and if it stays within compliant threshold, meaning it doesn't hallucinate too much. That is responsible, and then we can trust the system. But then the ethicist in the room is quite nervous about it. And she says, yeah, but nobody talks about what responsibility really is. It's about our values. It's about trust. It's about human dignity. And that is responsible AI. And yeah, of course, you have the sustainability guy in the room saying, yeah, but is this project green? Because if it's not... And finally, you have the last person in the room, the auditor, not agree with that. He wants to stop the discussion, and he says, okay, as long as this process is auditable, this thing is responsible. So you have the poor CEO within the board with a soup of contradictory and different description of what responsible AI really is. And the thing is, everybody owns a little piece of what responsible AI is. And the problem is the discussions pass each other and do not converge to a central point. So the breakdown in responsible AI is not the disagreement about the goal, because they all agree that the project has to be somehow responsible. The thing is, everyone wants AI to be responsible, but the responsibility is everywhere and nowhere at the same time. So everybody owns a slide, nobody owns the whole picture. And I don't know if you noticed during the conversation, but some of the guys mentioned trust when they were asking for responsible AI. And trust is a very important notion, and we hear about trust a lot nowadays. But responsibility and trust is not the same. So when we talk about trusted AI and we talk about responsible AI, it's not really the same. And words do matter, because today we know that words shape our environment. So what is trust exactly? Trust is a feeling. It is relational. We trust each other. It is rather passive than active. And we can say, I trust the sun to arise tomorrow morning, or I trust my friend to come to dinner this evening. And it's an allegation based on past history and what we believe will occur in the future. So we trust it. Responsibility is something totally different. Responsibility is a moral commitment. Responsibility is active, and it's about owning the future outcome, even if we don't know what the outcome will be. So in high-risk companies, we cannot really rely on a feeling of trust. We have to rely on responsibility. Because when things go wrong, trust is not going to help. Let's take the example of a self-riding car hitting a pedestrian. If the answer is to the family is, we trusted the algorithm, it's not really going to help. It's an empty statement. The question is more, who took the responsibility? So trust is what we hope for, and responsibility is what we answer for, is what we stand for. So the problems today, two kinds of problems today in companies about AI. The first one, we talked about it, everyone has another definition of what responsible AI should be, and it's quite fragmented. And the other one is that responsibility is living in a gray zone. And the gray zone is really between machines and humans. The humans handle the machine, and they believe the machine does what it should do. while the machine is only executing a few lines of code. So relying on a machine is possible, but in a certain extent. And the gray zone is really where the most companies today operate. And they operate in a circumstance that is really stressful and difficult, meaning the tools that we used to know, the AI tools, are becoming agentic tools. And that changes a lot of perspective. So that's the reality most of companies live in, including banks, including hospitals, including logistics. They are operating in this gray zone. And they are under pressure to deploy AI at scale, massively, rapidly, for efficiency and for competitivity. So when AI was a tool, it was quite easy. You had a tool, okay? For example, I will take an example in a supply chain of an automotive sector. It used to have a tool to regulate supply, and the company needs steel, to buy steel. So the previous AI tool was monitoring the stocks and said, okay, we need to buy steel, and my recommendation is that we buy that in China eventually because we have a supplier that we trust, it's cheap, and so forth. And then, okay, the manager receives that claim from the system and is going to review together with the system, if it's possible, within what deadline, and eventually order the steel in China. Today, it's not working like that at all. Today, it's really the agentic AI will do the work, and eventually the agent will see that there is a typhoon forming in Asia. Okay, so the system sees that the delivery will have 3 weeks delay, and that's a problem because the agentic AI is really modeled to be performant, so it will immediately decide to buy the steel, let's say in Turkey, in place of China. And what the system will automatically do is, okay, send a note to China, we cancel the order in Turkey, pay the cancellation fee to China, reroute the trucks, and eventually find another warehouse that is cheaper to compensate for the extra costs of the steel from Turkey. And a few minutes later, the manager will receive a green pop-up on his screen and see, okay, traffic rerouted, you don't have anything to do. It's done. It's good, because it was probably the right decision. But the thing is, the machine performs 100 of those decisions a minute. So it's not possible for a human, cognitively, to follow up on every step. So this is really the shift, the moment of decision where the human can interact and decide and put the responsibility at stake was a moment. Now it's not a moment anymore. It's a chain of actions. And it's a trajectory. So we have to define a level of responsibility, not on a moment anymore, on a trajectory. And this is kind of the end of the good old human in the loop system as we know it, because the human on the loop cannot be on the loop every time. So companies have to adapt and adapt fast, and it's complex. So I just told that, so voila. Another confusion that we often see in the world, in companies, is we've seen the distinction between trust and responsible. And now we see the difference between responsibility, oversight, and accountability, because they are often used the same, but they do not mean the same. So oversight is what is checking. It's really fact-checking, it's monitoring, it's validation, and it often appears during the process or even after the process. Accountability, on the other hand, it's really more legal, more formal, and it means that someone is accountable in case something goes wrong, but it's after the fact. Responsibility is more before the fact. Responsibility exists and must exist in times of uncertainty, before things become certain. And that is the big difference between responsible AI and being responsible for things, and trusted AI that we can trust, which is after the fact. So we've talked about words. Now we're going to talk about drifts, not algorithmic drifts. I'm not the best place to talk about that, but responsibility drifts. And in companies where you have AI-driven responsibility and agentic AI, you have three risks of drifts. The first one is the fragmentation. We're back in the boardroom scene from the beginning, and the project is there, and it has been given to three teams. So we have the legal team, we have the data team, and we have the business team. And let's say we take an example of a bank, and the AI system, the autonomous system, must decide on a credit line for the customers of the bank. And it does it very well. The banks use it a lot. But at a certain moment, some high category risk is flagged by the system, and it should not be. So there is a scandal because a person did not receive the loan, but with no apparent reason, and we talk about discrimination. So everybody takes the file and looks at the dashboards they're working with, and everything was green, everything was correct. Because the litigant says we did not use the word race of ethics or ethnies in the data set, so it's compliant. The data team says, okay, we had the 92% threshold, and we are in that. We were working with the zip codes and with the historical of the persons, and it's compliant, it's robust. And the business says, oh, well, the P&L looks good, so my dashboard is also green. And everybody has a green dashboard. Everybody didn't fail. But the problem is that someone has been discriminated, and the company is taken for responsibility. So it means that with a fragmented vision of what responsibility is, everyone looking at its own dashboard, you can do harm without knowing it, and everybody looks happy. Then you have a second metric, a second drift that is possible. It's the metrics that are replacing judgment. And indeed, nowadays, we really very much need the dashboards, because the sum of information is so massive, nobody can read that, nobody can cope with that. So machines are necessity, and dashboards are the necessity. But when the metrics are replacing human judgment, that might be a problem. And that's another example. Let's take a look at moderation of a big social network platform. We hear nowadays a lot that there is too much of violent content on social platforms. Yeah, the algorithm pushes that. Better for advertising because there are a lot of reaction. So, but yeah, let's say that the board hears a lot of negative press about it and wants to change something. So they decide to be quite radical and they say, okay, we're going to block 99% of the violent content on our social network. And occasionally the team, the technical team can do that and they succeed and 99% of the violent content stopped, is recalled after being spread on the network, and it's a success. All the dashboards are green. The thing is, because it's an algorithm and it's used to optimize, so sometimes it optimizes a little bit too much, the algorithm starts to suppress the historical context, the war reportings, the news, because, yeah, the images are violent, so it's suppressed. The problem is that the metrics, the dashboards that we're looking at, when there is a lot of information and of data, replaces the human judgment, because a human should have said, okay, this content, okay, it's violent, but it's news, or okay, it's violent, but it's a historical documentary. I cannot suppress that. The machine does not know that. So if we only look at the metrics, we might be wrong. The third shift, and I don't see it on my on my screen anymore. The third shift is oh, thank you. I love you. Is the shift to the aftermath. And indeed, that is the same thing with responsibility and trust, or with responsibility and accountability. So responsibility is on beforehand, and the others are during or after. So the shift to the aftermath is really a tendency that we see a lot with AI, and especially agentic AI, is that that is a syndrome of we'll fix it later, when it happens. And yesterday with tools, it was quite simple. You had a tool that did not function well, an AI tool, and you said, okay, I'll patch it next week, or I'll ask the user to do a reboot, a restart of the application. But today with agentic AI, and especially the ones that has a physical application in the world, you cannot reboot a patient that received occasionally the wrong medication of an AI hospital. Or you cannot reboot a pedestrian because of a self-driving car. So the consequences of real-life agents is far away than what we knew before. So the responsibility also has to move together with that, because it can have consequences. And these three drifts made me think of a triangle that we all learn in business schools, or we use in business in general. And this one is not from me, it's something I found on LinkedIn, and it happens to be in French then. The triangle of strategic failure is that in companies. The first side of the triangle is everyone work in silos, and they're not communicating with each other properly, and that's a problem. The second is they're not coordinated, they have unclear objectives. And the third one is an unstable focus of all those teams and of the company in general on what should we do, what is the line. When that happens in business, but usually the consequence, and that's in the center, nothing happens. So everything is stuck, everyone goes in other direction, and your business, nothing happens, you miss the deadlines, and some marvelous projects are in committees for years. It's painful, but at least it's visible. And it made me think or create another triangle, the one of the misplaced responsibility with AI. And the three things, the three corners, are the ones that we've just seen together. It's the great danger, the failure, is at the center is not that nothing happens. At the center, a lot of things happens because the systems deploys, the actions are taken every minute, and the action is not allowing the business to see that the problem is there. And it means that the failure in AI-powered companies is totally happening differently than in companies that we used to know before. Because everything might look great and the dashboards are green and business, it may even be very much okay. But the thing is, it will break all at once with 1 or 3 or 10 little or big events that were not predicted and that the system did not well evaluate. And at that point, if you did not organize responsibility very well since the start, you are in deep shit. So let's say, let's take an example that reboots the 3 categories of that triangle. Let's take a hospital, and there is a crisis, a new pandemic arises, and yeah, a lot of patients in the room, and the doctors and the nurse are really exhausted, and we need a solution because people are dying. And so the hospital takes the very good opportunity to say, okay, we thought about launching a new agent that will help us to make the triage of the patients when they come in the hospital. And yeah, this agent is deployed and it does the job very well. It analyzes the patients according to their symptoms and to their former medical parameters. And the system has really a life or death kind of impact because it decides if the patient moves to a room or waits in the waiting room. And it does it very well until the moment where a few cases start to arise. And these cases show a rare combination of symptoms that were eventually not well represented in the training data. And we don't know why. Perhaps the pandemic, the virus is in mutation, and you don't know the new symptoms and the new combination of symptoms that you may have. But the fact is, the system says, okay, go to the waiting room, and a few hours later, when the doctor comes really to see the patient, but the problem is it's too late. It happens, and if the hospital had not had this agent, a few more people would be dead. A lot of more people would probably be dead. But the problem is now the families sue the hospital, and the press is all around, and all of a sudden it's getting a political issue. And the analysis shows that nobody failed, because the system worked according to the thresholds and everything looks great. So the bad question that the hospital will start to ask after that is, who is responsible? But in fact, the problem is that nobody is responsible because they did not take the time. Of course, they were in a hurry, so fair enough, but they did not take the time at the beginning to assume responsibility and to give the responsibility to one organ or one person within the company and to ask the right questions. So they apply with an agentic system the all good rule as we will deploy and we will see it later as it arises. The problem is when it's day or life, it might be a constraint. Yes. Okay. No. Yes. So the thing is, how do we build responsible AI in these circumstances where everybody is in a rush? And how do we not fall in the comfort trap of saying, we launch, we'll see it later? Because it feels like comfort, but in fact, it's not comfortable at all to act this way. It feels rigorous because you say you have a human in the loop and we will monitor. But in fact, it's not good enough. And there you realize that the truth is that responsibility is always human. It cannot be a machine taking the responsibility for we don't know who precisely within the company. So we can say that responsibility is a human posture, but most of all, it's a leadership posture. Responsible AI is not so much about controlling the models, it's about governing permission, really. And that's the point. In this case of a hospital, what they could have done, it would help, it would not be the silver bullet, but it could help, is grant the permission to stop the model very clearly to one person in the company that has the mandate, someone of the board, obviously, to stop when, or to pause the system when we have questions, when we have problems. It hasn't been done, and after that, the time that problems arise, then you meet in committees once, twice, thrice, and the problem will have days or weeks passing by. If the responsibility had been taken beforehand, perhaps it was 15 minutes. And that changes a lot to pause a system after the first death, because you know before the first death that you're going to do that eventually, and you know who and how. So to be responsible, someone has to have the mandate, to know the situation. It has to be documented with all the departments, and it has to be revocable. So the permission given by a human to a machine must always be revocable. And that's a foundation, because if we cannot withdraw a permission fast, it means we're not in control. And if we're not in control, it means we're not responsible. So when I was working with one of the companies, and I saw that was the problem within the company, they had a lot of guardrails and governance and committees and stuffs and documents and dashboards. I thought, okay, everything is well in place except this kind of responsibility license. Yes. So responsibility license, I created one for this company, and we worked with that. And it seems at the beginning as taking a little bit more time, so a few hours or a few days or weeks in the worst cases. But in fact, it's a very necessary document. We've seen that working with them. It has 3 pillars. The first one is grant, make the boundaries of the responsibility. So what is allowed, what is not allowed, and it happened upstreams. The second pillar is guard. It means what are the conditions, how we stay responsible while AI is acting. And It's it's animation. And the third one, up, and the third one is pull. It's a kill switch of the thing. When and how we can withdraw a permission within the company for an AI system to work autonomously. So, unfortunately, this kind of document, you might think, yeah, is an extra thing to do, but yeah, it helps a lot. I can say when the shit happens. It's really a reality check for the company. It's more a discussion, it's more a process within the board and across the different silos of the organization to assess if we're mature enough to launch a process, a tool that will have an impact on the company and on the world. So it's not a silver bullet, it's an on-top thing, but it shows the importance of responsibility on beforehand. So that is the closing. There is one fundamental truth, is that no system can decide instead of a human and can carry the responsibility of deciding. And I see it more and more in some major AI companies, let's say, for example, Anthropic, the last days has said something in this direction. The companies, the next leaders of the new AI era will be, of course, the ones that have the best systems and the fastest chips and the biggest models or the finest models. But especially, they will be the companies taking responsibility, not for granted, but at the core. And the one who will explicitly and proactively claim their responsibility before harm occurs. And not because they are forced to do so, not because the regulation tells them to do so, but because they want to recognize themselves in the decisions taken in their name. So, the question really that is at the center of my reasoning is this one: when system acts without us, who are we willing to be as organizations and as persons? And that question is really very much in our hands. We can do something about it. Thank you.